everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. My name is Ellie. I'm Senior Community Executive for Findmypast. Welcome to Findmypast from home. We do these live sessions twice a week. We do a more relaxed session on a Friday for Fridays Live. And then we do things like interviews and presentations and things like that on a Wednesday. A very, very warm welcome to our special guest for today, long-standing and valued community member Karen de Bruyne, who is also events coordinator for London, Westminster and Middlesex Family History Society. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, that London Middlesex one's a long title to get round, isn't it?
I'm terrible at tongue twisters as well, so I'm surprised I managed to reel that off without stumbling over it. It's really, really exciting to have you on today because, you know, you're a familiar name in the comment section for Findmypast from Home live sessions and presentations and things. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on today. It's really, really excited.
Oh, good. It's a pleasure. It's really fun to do. So.
Yeah, let's welcome a few people in the comments before we get started, shall we? As you'll see many familiar faces as well. We've got Roz joining us from Massachusetts. We've got Victoria. Jim joining us from Australia. Roxanne, it's a chilly, rainy Utah. Actually, it's spring does feel like it's sort of here in Edinburgh today. I went out over lunch and the sun came out and then I was too hot and then it started raining and then I was too cold. It was very, very bizarre.
Yeah, it's been a very odd day here too. Cloudy, but quite warm.
Very muggy, I think. Sally's saying nice to put a name to a face I've seen in the comments. Yes, exactly. This is what's going to be so good about today because Karen is somebody, you all know Karen from the comments. So it's really nice to be able to see you. Lovely. So many of you joining here today. This is lovely. Fantastic. If you do have any questions for Karen, please do pop them into the comments and we will try and get to some maybe towards the end. Or Karen, if you spot any good questions in the comments, you can say, Ellie, there's a good question there. Can we do that one? Fantastic. We're going to be talking a little bit about the work that the London, Westminster and Middlesex Family History Society do, a little bit of Karen's background as a genealogist, and of course some light-hearted genealogy and community chat. So yeah, let's dive straight in, shall we? Karen, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I live in Enfield, which is in North London, just on the edge of just before the Green Belt, just north M25 for those that know it. And it's about 6 miles from where I was born. And I live with my husband and my grown-up son. I left school at about 16 and I worked for a high street bank. And then I worked for McDonald's, yes, the hamburgers, in the accounts department. Then I went on a bit of a travel. And then I returned and worked for an investment bank for quite a few years, whereas I studied for my accountancy exams, etc. After I was made redundant there when our son was 2, I got a job teaching at part-time at a Capel Manor, which is a land-based college, just actually quite near where I live, but around London. So it's quite an unusual place. But last December, I actually gave up my main teaching role, which was maths and English for apprentices. I still do a bit of teaching. I teach business startup to saddlers and shoemakers, which has become quite interesting considering a lot of family history involves around that sort of trade as well. And I now do family history for each other. Other people, and I volunteer for various family history groups, including the Society of Genealogists and the London, Westminster, Middlesex Family History Society.
It is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But yes, we'll get some to that in a minute.
Like Surrey Family History Society or something like that. It's nice and easy to get out.
Exactly. But it definitely does sound that you've had, a sort of a very varied sort of life and career, and now you're a professional genealogist. In that sort of sense, all of us here are interested in family history in some way or another, and I think family history can mean different things to different people. So I'd be really interested to hear what it actually means to you.
So I think I was very lucky. I knew lots about my direct family. It's something we talked about, had photos up about and everything. But going further back has helped me understand how we ended up here, how I'm such a Londoner, haven't moved far, because so many of my family have come from around here, although I have a big strain of Norfolk, and I can see one of the people in the comments, Carol, is actually my cousin, second cousin once removed, I think. So that line comes from Norfolk and Hertfordshire and Lincolnshire. I have a lot of family. I was always interested in history when I was at school, but sadly, disappointingly, I only got a grade E for my O level. I think it's partly because in those days it was a memory test and not actually something, like it is now. So that was, but doing this, I've learned about history all around the world, different eras. I'm working on a project at the moment, which is the 1660s for a client. And, I've had to learn about regicide and all sorts of things. Yes, in order to do that. And I also love finding out about other people's history. Sometimes it sounds awful that I found mine a bit boring, especially when I keep knocking up against those brick walls. So to being able to do it for somebody else has been a real boost to my thoughts and ideas, and often given me clues to look at areas that I haven't for my family. I've just done a project for a family friend, and she didn't know anything about her great-grandparents and on her father's side. And now she wants me to go even further back, having delivered that. So, yeah, it's been really good.
It's so rewarding doing other people's family history and helping them with that, because I can sympathize with you. I find my family tree a little bit boring. I mean, no family tree is actually boring. There's stories to be found everywhere. But I know what you mean. There's something really quite rewarding about helping somebody else with their family history and their family tree.
That's the reconnecting with the past or family you never knew you had.
Absolutely. And I think just going back to what you said about getting an E in your O-level history, I think I've heard, we've talked about this a little bit before on Findmypast from Home, about some people who don't actually like history or not really interested in history, but they love their family history, or they weren't so good at history at school, but again, they love family history. I think the great thing about family history is that there really is something for everybody, and you don't have to be able to reel off kings and queens and dates and things like that. That's not what this is about, basically. That was my trail of thought for that. And you are now a professional genealogist, and a recent professional genealogist, I believe. So what made you want to go down this avenue? Why did you want to make a career out of family history?
Well, I first discovered that my dad actually had the Brown family Bible. So although my name is de Bruyne, and I use it because it sounds a bit fancier than brown, it means brown in Dutch. But I always thought, I'll never find anything out about that. But this Bible from 1867, in the middle of it, it had a nice long list of children's births, a photo of my second great-grandfather, and the birth certificate of my great-grandfather, Arthur Edgecombe Brown. In the front was a dedication, which was rather sweet. It said, presented to Mr. and Mrs. Walter Brown by the Friends of Albion Chapel, Hammersmith, on the occasion of their marriage, being the first in the above chapel, March the 12th, 1867. And this just got alarm bells ringing, thinking, what have we got to do with Hammersmith? What on earth's an Albion Chapel? And let alone what the middle name Edgecombe comes from. I mean, where do you get a name like that from? That's when I started looking at documents. I used a free subscription that was online at the time. It was at the start of online research. So I was quite fortunate in a way, or maybe unfortunate, that I didn't get the big grounding in archive research like a lot of people did. I ended up with notes on bits of paper and tried to make a tree on an Excel spreadsheet. Being an accountant, I felt the urge to do that. So my husband, bless him, bought me some software, and I haven't looked back from that, really. That's what started it. 2-3 in the morning, like a lot of us. Our tree is very wide. It starts from our sun and goes back down both mine and my husband's line. Well, more on that later, because that's the complicated one. And I love researching the stories and finding out the stories about people, like the newspapers. It's just been a goldmine of information that you don't get from those documents. I have to go very wide because I like to use DNA a lot as well. So you only get the DNA clues if you go a little wider. I love this research so much that I decided a little bit of education was a good idea. I'd done some courses with the Society of Genealogists, but I wanted to do something a bit more in depth and something that I could do at home, flexible enough to fit in with work and life. I quite like the idea of having a qualification at the end, maybe working in education myself. I felt that it should have something. And thinking ahead a long way then, maybe, you know, once I retire, I could carry on doing it. That would be quite nice to do. So I signed up to the University of Strathclyde course and did the postgraduate certificate. It was good. I might return to do the diploma at a later date, but life took over a bit and things, well, as we know, in the last 2 years have been unusual. And to be honest, at that point, I couldn't really afford to spend much more on doing it. So in the meantime, I picked up some small research jobs. My first was 30 hours reading South African newspapers at the British Library, which sounds really dull, but it's amazing once you get into it, how interesting it is. You do get a bit sidetracked looking at the things you shouldn't be looking at. It was for a fellow Strathclyde graduate, and she was doing some research for a whiskey company in Scotland. And she lived in Scotland, so she paid me to go into British Library to look at the newspapers. I don't know if they're online since, but certainly I had to go there then. So during lockdown, I applied for an associate membership at AGRA, the Association of Genealogists and Researchers in Archives, and also became a volunteer host for the Zoom talks on the Society of Genealogy. So if you recognise me, it's possibly from those sort of things that I've done. Sadly, last August, my mother was taken ill, and while she was in hospital, I realised if she recovered, and she would need a lot more support than I could give her whilst working as much as I was. So I'd sort of made a mental note that that's what I was going to do, and give up some of my teaching. But sadly, she never made it out of the hospital, and she died in September. But this gave me a real push to reassess what I was doing, and thought, you know, I love this so much. And she was one of my biggest supporters in the family history. So I decided, right, go for it. And that's what I did. I've found some work through AGRA website. And in March, I gave my first talk on starting family history research for the local WI. That was amazing. It was like so many people. It was a little daunting for your first talk. And I'm booked in June to talk to a local probus group, which is a bit like the Rotary. I've also delivered a few genealogy experience research days for a friend of mine who was also a Strathclyde student, Michelle. She sells like you go hang gliding. You can go and spend the day with a genealogist learning what the documents are and how to do it and getting started in your tree. So that's been really good. I'm loving it so far. Having a business background has probably helped quite a lot, because I know about the basics of actually running the business, doing the bookkeeping and that sort of thing. I think it's my sales skills that probably are in the lacking bit. Like a lot of us, trying to sell what we do is not the easiest thing.
I used to sell advertising before I worked for Findmypast for a magazine, and I was not good at it. Let's just say that. But goodness me, Karen, what a whirlwind! And obviously, you're so passionate about family history, and what you were just saying there about your mum, that made me tear up, honestly. But yeah, what a journey you've been on. You know, you're qualified, and you're now working with people like AGRA and the Society for Genealogists, and the family history group that you're part of. It's just fantastic. I'd say I'm proud of you, but I don't want that to come across as condescending, but I am. Yeah, I just think it's wonderful. So
it's partly the community, because it's such a lovely community that's pulled me through the last couple of years, to be honest. I don't think, otherwise what would you've done in lockdowns and things? Sat and got bored, or fractures, or fought with your family.
Yes, I must admit, I was quite happy that we had this little bubble of people that were there a couple of times a week, and it didn't matter what else was going on outside, and the awful news that was on the TV, or just for an hour or so a week, you could just sit down and just think about family history. It's good stuff. Okay, we do have a couple of questions in the comments. Would you like to do a couple now, or should we do them later?
Possibly. Yeah, no, we can do them now.
Okay, we've got one from Daphne here. When building your family tree, how many times removed cousins do you go back?
As far as possible. I have no limits, to be honest. My first cousin 4 times removed, Sophia, is probably one of the most fascinating stories I've ever uncovered. It's to do with Napoleon, mental hospital, desertion, bigamy, and an aeronaut. Yeah.
Are we coming back onto that later, or do we need to come
No, I'm saving that one. I'm saving that one for another occasion.
Fine, that's fine. I'm not going to make you go into it now if it can be saved for another time. There was another question here. Let me just grab that. Bear with me a second. Yes, it was from Darren. I'm trying to find a birth certificate for my great-great-grandfather who was born in London in 1855. I've tried the usual searches, but nothing found. Do you have any tips, please?
Okay, so London's quite a big place. The borders of London move about a bit too, because that's why our title's a bit fractious, because it covers what we think of London was Middlesex and covers Westminster as well. So think quite broadly. Try varying the places you look at. That's what I would do, and the names and the spellings.
Fantastic.
Thank you. If you're still not sure, try messaging us through Facebook. The group's got a Facebook friend forum, and you may well get some help there. People are obviously very friendly and help out and give you some clues. So
the genealogy community are very, very friendly. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. A couple of people commenting about the fact that about the Bible.
Yeah,
in particular, Jen, who's in the comments with us today. Hi, Jen. Who we can sort of see fangirling a little bit when Karen's talking about things like the Bible, which
it was, considering with the Brown surname too. It took me back to Rickmansworth. I still can't get that far back on that line, but enough to be, quite happy for now. So yeah. And
a couple of other people saying about history at school. Jackie says, I had a useless history teacher and I got an H in my O-level exam.
Makes me feel a bit better. My history teacher was lovely, Mrs. Jean. She also taught us English.
And even Sally said, I dropped history in favour of geography. And Janet says, history has always interested me, so family history was a natural progression. Dropped geography for history O-level. Now I wish I'd done both, as my geography is hopeless. Do you know what, Janet?
Geography.
Janet? Mine is too. I was in a meeting yesterday with Jen and some other colleagues, and we were talking about, I want to say, was it Wiltshire, Jen, we were talking about? I think it could have been Wiltshire. And I think because Jen's based over in the States, and Jen said, where is Wiltshire? I need to find it on my map. And I said, I'm terrible. Anywho, let's move on from that terrible failing of mine. There's a couple of other questions and comments in the moment, but let's move on. Let's have a chat about the society that you're affiliated with. So you're the events coordinator for London, Westminster and Middlesex Family History Society. What does that actually involve?
For me, I basically seem to spend a lot of time doing emails. Like a lot of people, really. But I'm responsible for the booking of the society into events. So not our own events, so booking into events like when we had Roots Tech and that sort of thing. I also have to try and persuade the volunteers to help out and send the promotional material to event organisers and report back on the event. So I started this again during lockdown. So all my events so far have been virtual. We have our first live event that we are attending on the 14th of May at the Haringey Local History Fair at Bruce Castle in Tottenham. Yes, we're very excited. I think in the background they're probably rustling, trying to find the banners and the tablecloths and the things to take with us, because it's all a bit strange. Yes.
Yes, it'll be lovely to go back to in-person events as well.
Yes, yeah.
It's nice
The
to have
online ones are good, and it saves you traveling. I must admit, I've attended so much more stuff than I ever would have done, because you don't have to travel. Especially other family history groups that my family are from, that I wouldn't get to. You know, my husband's partly borders from Scotland. I couldn't go to Scotland for a family history meeting. It would be ridiculous. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a... Coming to in-person events is great, and it's not lovely to see people in person. But yes, the travel side of things is sometimes a bit tricky. I remember going over to Roots Tech this was 2019. I think I went over to Roots Tech in Salt Lake City, and although it was an amazing couple of days, the travel was a killer. I don't think I slept. So if any of our lovely community members watching today, or anybody else who happens to have tuned in, if they have ancestors from, you know, the London area, why should they consider joining the London, Westminster and Middlesex Family History Society? You need an acronym, that's what you need.
Well, for a start, everybody in the group is so knowledgeable. It's if I'm not sure, that's where I go and ask. So that's a real advantage. They had some excellent talks on Zoom. So we now have a virtual branch, and we have 2 live branches that are back and running, Barnet and Rayners Lane. And we also hold informal meetings where we share ideas and research problems, which is quite nice. So we all get together in a room, nicely socially distanced, around a table. And, you know, if anybody's got a brick wall or a question or something they share, that's what we do. So that's lovely. It is nice to be in a group where they don't moan like your family might do and say, oh, no, not that, when you found a discovery that you want to share.
Yeah, that is so true, actually. I think I can sympathise, because like myself and Jen often send each other discoveries, because we know the other will react positively, whereas other people might, like family members, for example, might not. Yeah,
we've got a WhatsApp group for our some of the girls that did the genealogy course at Strathclyde, so that's a good safe place to vent or ask or share those sort of things.
That's really sweet. It just goes back to sort of the community aspect of family history. You know, family history, I said this all the time on Findmypast from Home, but family history does not have to be a solitary activity. No. You might, if somebody doesn't know what a family historian or a genealogist does, they might picture somebody sort of just sitting at a desk in front of a computer and not speaking to anybody, but that's absolutely not true. There is a vibrant family history community, whether it's the Findmypast community, whether it's the wider genealogy community, whether it's through societies like the Society of Genealogists or AGRA or smaller family history societies. There's so much going on, and there are like-minded people out there waiting to connect with you and to share ideas with you. So yeah, that's my spiel on that. Does the society publish books and journals and anything like that?
Yeah, we do quite a few, actually. So part of your membership, which the lowest amount I think is £12 a year, so it's nothing really, you get a quarterly magazine and called the Metropolitan, and you can write articles for it if you wish. I haven't managed to do that quite yet, but hoping to. And we also publish the Magic Parish Guides, and I have an example here. So this is the one I'm taking with me tomorrow to Westminster Archives, the St Clement's Danes. And all I can say, it's a book of goodness. It tells you where to go for everything. It's got website lists, burial register, where to find this, that, and the other. It is, and it's got a map showing what the boundaries are. So for London, that is so useful. Now, I believe at the last count, we were at 29 of these. The most recent was published last week, which was on Totteridge, which weirdly is one of those places like Barnet, where I was born, was in Barnet, which was in Hertfordshire, but is now in London. Yeah, one of those dodgy moving the lines. We also have books on monumental inscriptions, so dedicated people that have been around graveyards and churches and inscribed what they list and everything, which is so invaluable. A lot of them are quite old that we're trying to publish. which is wonderful, because so sad that many gravestones, you know, erode over years and you can't quite read the words. So hopefully somebody some years ago might have done it. So they were just going, I think we've got about 6 or 7 so far on the website, but we're going through and adding more and more to it, so it's really useful. And then there's 2 directories that we've published, one on the City of London census for 1851, and also on the streets of Westminster, because they changed the names of roads as well, which isn't very convenient to people. So those are really useful if you're not sure about where to go for things. So they're available from the Society through genfair.co.uk. So you get, and also you can buy membership through there if you want it as well.
So there's lots going on, basically, and I really want to get my hands on some of these parish guides. So I do love a map, and although I've not found any London ancestors yet. My other half, his one side of his family are from London. So yeah, I'm just going to go back into the comments quickly before we move on, if that's okay. Let me just have a scroll and just see what I can find. Oh goodness.
What's your go-to resource for seeing the different areas of London and the changes over the centuries? Have you seen that one?
Is it that one? Is that Jen's question?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Well, one of the things, I'm just turning around to my bookshelf here. This is really good. Helps, and some websites have the digital version of that. It's quite big and heavy. That's one of the things my mum bought me for Christmas some years ago. Yeah, so that's really useful. And if I find any other maps, etc., to do with parish boundaries, I just stick the copies in the book so I know where they all are, because that's the worst thing, trying to find things when you want to reference them.
The rest of you at home can't see, but we can see Jen, and Jen actually just held up her own copy.
I don't know, with maps, it's the online stuff is fantastic, but having the physical map can make quite a big difference. So yeah, they're really useful.
Absolutely. I'm just scrolling up to see if I can find questions. I think Jen told me that there was a good question from Victoria, which I'm just trying to find. I can't find it. I can't find it. Jen, if you can see it, please just put it on screen for me, because I can't find it now. Sally saying, yes. Oh, there it is. I'll go back to Sally in a moment. Victoria says, having a lot of ancestors in these areas, is there a correct way for recording whether London, Middlesex, Surrey, as I struggle with the dates and what border area changed and when? When one has changed, do you then go and put Middlesex, for example, which is now London?
For myself, I personally usually put, for the record, where it was at the time it happened. So it may look a bit odd because somebody was in Middlesex and then Hertfordshire and then London, but whenever the event was, that's what the place I put. That makes sense. Other people may do it differently, but that's what I stick to. I think as long as you stick to the same convention, you should be okay.
Yeah, I think that's sensible advice. Thank you, Jen, for finding that, and thank you, Victoria, for the question. Jane has also joined us, saying she was walking the dogs. Long walk with the dogs. I'm jealous. I'd have loved the long walk today. Yes, going back to Sally's comments, saying I totally agree. Lockdown was awful, but Wednesdays and Fridays were always great and something to really look forward to. That's what I like to hear. Just doing our bit, all of us, aren't we? Okay, I'm just scrolling down to see if there's any more questions here. Bear with me a second. Patricia says, I think that says, my husband was a geography teacher. I still can't read a map.
What my parents did when I was young was, because my dad travelled a lot for work, my mum stuck a map of the world on the kitchen wall. And we did that when our son was little too. And that really helped, because anytime anything came up in the news or something you heard, then we just looked at the map on the kitchen wall.
That's sensible. Janet actually says, I've been with the London, Westminster and Middlesex Family History Society since I started researching my family tree. That's what we like to hear.
That's what we like. I think we've got
Exactly.
over 500 and something members at the moment. So
That's amazing.
it's pretty good.
Yes, Janet did say tracing, not teaching. Yes. I thought you meant tracing or researching. I read your mind. It's fine. I read your mind. Holger, I'm just scrolling to see if there are any other questions at the moment. Some really good comments, but I just want to make sure that we move on to discoveries. Bear with me a second.
This one was quite interesting. The tea merchant. Oh, it won't work for me. The tea merchants. Kim's second great grandfather's uncle. Orange.
Oh, here we go. From Kim.
Yeah.
Yes. My second great grandfather's uncles were orange and tea merchants in, I can't pronounce that. You're going to have to do it for me.
St. Botolph's. Botolph's, I think.
In late 1700s, early 1800s. I found that interesting. That is cool.
So one of my distant relations married a tea merchant, and I found a picture, sort of sketch within the London Gazette. It was an article about the place, and it had actually his tea merchants in the picture.
That's pretty cool.
His last name was Wig. It was quite easy to notice.
Lovely. Okay, keep the questions coming and the comments coming, everybody, if you would like Karen to address a question. Let's move on. Now, because Karen, you are a genealogist and a valued member of the Findmypast community, you must have some really, really good discoveries. We've already talked about one, but we're not going to be talking about that one today. Are there any that you would like to share with us? And hopefully they will inspire us to go and find out more about our own family stories.
Well, this is my most recent discovery and probably my biggest ever. This was just, and it's actually my husband's family. So he was born in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. He's the definition of a mixed other ethnicity. The quarter Scottish bit, I've made some real good progress on. Sadly, when you have families that migrate, they often lose the family stories, so they don't know where they came from. So it's been really lovely to reconnect them with the locations in Scotland that they came from. The rest of his 3 quarters were based on family stories and a bit of DNA ethnicity to work out where they're from, but no real evidence or documentation. But roughly 1/8 Burmese, 1/8 Malay, 1/4 Thai, 1/8 Chinese, 1/8 Dutch. So quite a mix-up bit. It was his Dutch bit that I finally been able to crack last month with a lot of help from other people. And I've been able to tell the family where their great-grandfather actually came from, which has been wonderful. And that was only last month. The big problem was we knew his grandfather was Thomas Karen de Bruyne, was born in Sumatra in Indonesia. His father was Jacob Bruyne, but it was spelt differently. It was spelt Bruijn. And he worked for Delhi, which was a Dutch plantation company, but we knew nothing much else. We knew he had another brother, and we're in contact with a descendant of that other brother. It was a DNA match that gave us a wonderful clue, and this is where it gets a bit wild. So Gabby, who is we now know is my husband's 3rd cousin, was from Paraguay. So that was a mystery to start with. It was quite a high match. She had a little tree attached to her DNA match, and her paternal grandmother had Bruyne, Bruyn, in her very long Spanish name, because Paraguay Spanish has lots of long names. So I messaged her, and bless her, she messaged me back and said, unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often with DNA matches. They don't all message back. I think quite a lot of people just do it to find out what their ethnicity is and not actually that interested in family history. So she told me, she said, my great-grandfather was Cornelis Bruyne, migrated from the Netherlands to Paraguay to work on the railways. So I researched her great-grandfather. He married in the Catholic, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, Catedral de Nuestra Senora Asunción. It's basically in the capital of Paraguay. And luckily, the registrations includes his parents' names. And to cut a long story short, this was enough to find the family in the Netherlands. Sandra, a genealogy friend who I found through Twitter, volunteered to help me with the Dutch records. She was raised in the Netherlands. And although Google Translate and a dictionary are magic for text, when it comes to the handwriting, it is really hard to work out. You can just about work out names, but it's everything else that's a problem. So it turns out, although I traced back, I had the wrong Jacob. It was his cousin. The Dutch have a tradition of naming their children after their grandparents. And of course, this caused problems because I had lots of Jacobs. The correct Jacob was actually Gabby's great-grandfather's brother. So 2 of the children migrated abroad. This made much more sense from the Centimorgan's match. Sandra found the population register, which is a bit like a census, that detailed Jacob left for Sumatra in 1884. So that cinched it, really, that how we knew it had to be the right person. So after 26 years of having an unusual surname, no being able to pronounce it, we know that Zaanstad, Noord-Holland, Netherlands, just north of Amsterdam, and can trace the family to Jacob Cornelis Brun, born 1675 in Zaandam. And it literally is the place of windmills and cheese and water.
That's just amazing. And you know what? It really shows the power of putting your heads together and asking for help from somebody else, because we've all got our own little specialities, right? We might not, if you're listening out there now, you might think, oh, I don't have a specialist area in family history. I disagree. I think you will. I think you will have one, and it might be quite broad, it might be quite niche, but honestly, the power of taking 2 or 3 people and putting all your knowledge together, this has cracked that case, which I just love.
Yeah. And there were a couple of other things, like there's a couple of other people who on Twitter are Dutch genealogists who have amazing websites with information about what the details are within the documents and what you need to look for to go down the line, because it's not the same in another country, their records. I wish mine were all Dutch because they're a gold mine.
It's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go back up to the comments for now, and then I wanted to find, there was one a bit earlier on I think I missed, so bear with me just a second while I find it. I'm just going to talk, really randomly while I try and find it. Are you going to be joining us on Friday for Friday's Live, Karen? That's what I want to know.
I plan to. It is a certain day of my year, but yeah.
Is it your birthday on Friday?
Yes, yes.
That's amazing. Jen, did you hear that? It's Karen's birthday on Friday.
So I may be. It depends.
We would understand if you didn't, because obviously, you're going to be out celebrating and having a good glass of wine and that sort of thing. Yes, there was one here. This is from Carol. It's cut off, unfortunately. We can't see the end of it, but we'll try our best. So my great-granddad's great-grandfather, Joseph Ashburn, came to Alnwick in Northumberland in the late 1790s with the East Middlesex militia and married a local lass and stayed. I haven't been able to find out where he came from originally. His former parish was given on his marriage as St Michael's, Coventry, where presumably they were billeted before. I'm a septuagenarian. I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry. I'm in my 70s with health issues, so I can't visit the National Archives or afford to pay for a lot of research. I think this is going to end with, do you know of anybody in London, Middlesex who might be able to help, for example?
I will have a look. I'll look back at this and have a look and see what I can find.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Carol, watch this space. Yes, sorry I missed your question earlier, Carol. Normally we don't get questions so early on, so I just missed it, I'm afraid. We have had a couple more. Let me just scroll back down. Bear with me a second. I'm just catching up with myself. You guys are very, very chatty today, which is lovely, but it just means that I have to sort of like manically scan through everything. So yes. Yes, Jane also says I struggle getting replies to DNA messages. Yes, DNA messages, family tree messages, it can be a struggle because sadly not everybody is as into family history as we are. just makes me so sad. Chris says, I've actually been to Sandown. It's really worth visiting. I'm very jealous.
We're hoping to. We have a big birthday, my husband, this year, so we're thinking of a pilgrimage.
You should absolutely go, and then we all want the photographs afterwards, please. Thank you very much. Okay. Lloyd actually says, Dutch is crazy because your surname is a van. If your surname is a van, it can change every generation if your family moved.
The names are very confusing, and the de in ours keeps disappearing and appearing. So my husband's cousin doesn't use the de in his, and it only seemed to appear with the grandfather. So who knows?
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to hopefully to end on is, if anybody listening today, maybe hopefully it's inspired them to go back to their family tree or to start their family tree. I wondered if you could share with us your maybe like top 3, however many family history tips that you swear by and that you have in mind whenever you're researching or you hit a brick wall. What would you recommend to our lovely community?
So firstly, I'd say never give up. Even if you get stuck, just put that one away for a while and come back to it, because you never know. New things appear, DNA matches appear, new documents appear. Not everything is in online. We still have to bear in mind it's only a small percentage. So what I do with that is I save up the researches for archives. I stick them in Evernote, and I have a long list. So if I go somewhere that I know what I want to look for. Revisit documentation. You never know what new information you may find by revisiting. I find I don't gather it all in the first place, and also transcribing documents can really help you focus on what's in there, to make it more obvious to what you've got there. I mean, like witnesses on wedding certificates, I never used to look at those until somebody suggested it, and it's now, oh wow, that's such a big clue sometimes, the witness on a wedding statement. Keep notes, document everything. As I said, I use Evernote. So if I find a piece of information, particularly if it's about a place, I share it to Evernote. There are other things. There's OneNote and Notes, and there's another one, I can't remember what it was called, that a lot of people use, because you never know when you might be able to use it. And most of these software notebooks have a brilliant search function, so you can just search and it will find any word within what you've saved. Makes it really useful. And I'm going to be cheeky and add a fourth: never be embarrassed to ask for help. It paid off for me 100%. Twitter, Facebook groups, and societies, invaluable for help, and a wonderful community.
Yeah, I think that's all 4 of those are just brilliant. In particular, number 2, because the amount of times I've gone back to a record and realised that I missed something first time round that was actually quite crucial. I'm terrible for that, but I'm getting better. And then
my uncle, a couple of years back, produced this family photograph album I didn't know existed, and on the front there's a photo, the first one. They're not very well labelled, which doesn't make life easily, but the first one in pencils is Fraulein German. Now, I am as English can be. I have never found anybody German. So I was looking at my great-grandparents' wedding certificate the other day. I was filing it away after scanning it, etc., and suddenly looked at the witnesses, and it says something or other Fritsch, Freich. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. So I started digging into that. Turns out her sister, so the woman getting married, my great-grandmother, married an Austrian German. So now I'm wondering, they were witnesses to each other's weddings as well, so there was no doubt it was the right group. So I'm now wondering whether that was a picture of her in the photo album. Could it be an in-joke that she was Fraulein German? Don't know who else it could be.
Yeah, just going back to witnesses.
Yeah. I would not. I might have got there eventually, but it wouldn't have sunk in, that connection, without having seen the certificate with the witnesses and thought, well, who's that? And then thought, oh, it's usually siblings that witness weddings, or most likely, if not friends. and went from there. Still don't know if it's her, but it's a nice picture.
Everybody, if you take anything out of today's session, it's go back and check your documents and check the witnesses for marriages. There you go.
Yeah.
we've just that's the rest of your week sorted now, everybody.
Yeah.
Because we'll all be so busy doing all of that. I did find a couple of other questions here. Victoria was asking, what software do you use?
Okay, so the software my husband bought me 20-something years ago was Family Tree Maker. I've no idea whether it's the best. I've stuck with it. It's what Strathclyde University recommend for their course. A lot of other people rave about a lot of other software, but I find it's quite good. So it's what you're used to, I think, a lot of it. It's not the cheapest, that's the only thing.
There's a question here from Tony. It's how did some families come to get an alias? My ward alias far more gave me a problem until I realised it wasn't meant to. I'm not sure I'm reading that correctly. Meant to be
okay. I don't know what it quite means by alias either. I have had a name change that we proved by DNA. So there's a bit of a rogue back on my grandmother's line called Henry Pinchbeck, according to the family photo album. Well, that's another amazing story. My third cousin in America bought our family photo album on eBay. All the names labeled, all the pages, all photos labeled, and several pages of a Bible that obviously been torn out and stuck in it. So my great-great-grandparents migrated to the US in about 1880s. My great-grandfather was the only one who stayed. Fortunately, the family stayed in touch and I've reconnected. But yeah, she bought the album on eBay. Anyway, so this Henry Pinchbeck was a bit of a rogue. And his grandson changed his name, or I thought he had, because all the other names matched and they had unusual middle names. And then I had a contact from turns out to be a cousin who'd found my tree and said, oh, I'm curious you found this, and his name was Pierce and not Pinchbeck, which is what the name change was. And you know, I checked up and we are DNA matches, and subsequently I found a record that said that a listing, I think it was from Findmypast, that had a newspaper clipping about that's the name he's now using, but no reason why.
Yeah, I think very often there are no reasons for a name change, but I think what you've said about DNA circumventing the name changes, I think that's a really
well, it helps
point.
to confirm that you're on the right track and you've not just got somebody with the same name, which is a big problem, particularly if you've got a common name.
Exactly. And just coming back to the power of a second, third, fourth pair of eyes, Chris says, I came back to one after finding a confusing entry on the 1921 census with other eyes and help from Findmypast forum members. I've now almost fully solved these complex families. Should have gone back and checked my notes from years ago, as it was what lots of people were suggesting. I had already documented it. Brilliant. Lovely. Now I'm just double checking to see if there are any more questions in here. Daphne saying, do you teach on Future Learn?
No, I haven't done so. No.
Maybe you should. Maybe that's your sign.
Maybe I should, yes.
Another question from Sally. Do you keep all paper records or do you just reply on digital records?
Both. But anything I have on paper, I'll also digitize.
Great.
Yeah, so I've got like albums on the side here that are full of the paper copies of things that I've got, but I will always digitize it and attach it into the tree so I know where it is.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think that sort of wraps us up nicely at the 50-minute mark. Karen, it's been an absolute delight having you here today. You're so easy to chat to, and it's just been so nice to put a face to a name, because we've seen you so often in the comments on Findmypast from Home, and it's just really, really lovely to welcome a community member on here to have a chat about all things family history. So it's been lovely. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You'll have to come back and tell us about that other story.
Sophia.
Yes,
Yeah.
tell us about Sophia another time. Yes, to everybody who's watched today, I hope you've enjoyed yourself. We are back on Friday for Fridays Live, and Jen is going to be back. And Jen's currently doing a little bit of a dance because it's her Fridays Live and she loves it and she's excellent at it. So yes, thank you very much to Jen for doing the comments, manning the comments today. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for all your insightful questions and your comments. And we will catch you next time. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.